All right, we did the countdown counter so that we would start on time, and then we ended up talking. So take it away, Dr. Clay.
One of the gentlemen, there was a former student of mine, was the one who made the presentation on the Bibles for Russia and all of that. Have to come and see us. Let me first of all again say that we thank you for your response about the camp. We'll have a lot more news about it next week. We're going to kind of get it all put together, but feel free to give me a call at home or see me after class, and I'll be glad to sign you up. We so appreciative of all the cards you're sending to different people, and so we occasionally mention someone. I did know a couple of days ago that Joe McConnell was in the hospital. I knew I had to call him about the camp, and he called me out of the blue, and foot problems. They had to operate on his diabetic foot, and he got up a couple of days ago, and so we're glad that we'll keep him in mind. And I know there's just so many people with different sicknesses, so we'll just kind of pray for all of them together, if you'll bow with me. Our Father, as we are thinking about people really close to us that really, really desperately need our prayers, and we're sending a lot of prayers at the same time. We ask you to bless Joe and his situation, and know he's going to be home about 6 weeks on medication, but ask you to bless him. And we thank you, Father, for the chance to talk about your Holy Land, your just wonderful descriptions we have in the Bible, and how all of that does connect and help us understand the text. Thank you for Stan and all the work he's done in putting this together, and thank you for the opportunity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. What we did is, as you know, I think this is week number 4, I believe. Is it 5? Yeah, because it's May. We had 4 weeks in May, April, 5 in May, and I think we have 4 in June. And so we bounced around a little bit at the beginning to get you introduced, and then last week we actually thought of a kind of a systematic tour. And so we landed at Tel Aviv, which is just right next door to Joppa, and that's where we land most of the time, not always. We've actually flown through Jordan, through Amman, Jordan, and come through Egypt, and come through Greece, and blah, blah, blah. But in any case, we usually landed at Tel Aviv, and we went to Jezreel last week, and then on to Mount Carmel and Megiddo. That was what we covered. Now we're going east, and we're going to look at some really unusual and spectacular sights. So we threw a few maps in here for you to get you a feel, and basically the next 3 weeks, just very quickly, we're going to spend our time in Galilee today, and then we're going to end up at Tiberias at the end of today and stay in the hotel there. Then we're going north on the 8th, up around Dan and Caesarea Philippi and the Golan Heights. We're going to come down on the 15th, and we're going to go around the Sea of Galilee. So we're going to spend a lot of time in Galilee.
I was told last time we did maps that I should have used this so that people knew what in the world to look at. So when you say things, I'm gonna use the laser pointer so that they can see.
Oh, okay, great. Also, we had a request last Sunday. Someone said, well, why don't you pass out some maps?
Yeah.
So by next week, we hope to have a little stack of maps that we'll have outside. We'll pass them out in the auditorium, and we'll include some of the maps we've already used, and we'll include these. But for example, as you come from the coast, from Ptolemy is right next to Haifa, and we're going to deal with Ptolemais, first. And anyway, when we leave Ptolemais, ancient Akko, we will come east and we will come down to Cyprus and see a spectacular site there where Herod Antipas had built his capital and other things happened. And we'll work our way over to to Tiberias. So let's go to, again, another map kind of showing you. I wish Caesarea Maritima were on the coast. Go south a little bit on the coast. Stand right now. All right, go up a little bit more. Right in there, you're talking about Caesarea Maritima, we did last week. And then you work your way up to Haifa. Is that, if you'll go to that point where Mount Carmel goes into the sea to the left, just left of Es, so right there. That's Haifa, modern day Haifa, and the end of the range there. If you look across the bay, there is the city of Akko. And that's where we're going to go in just a few minutes. Again, we're going to pass these maps out to you. And this one.
There's Megiddo there,
right.
There's Nazareth.
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time in Galilee the next 3 weeks, okay?
Joppa, way down here where we landed.
Right. And the next slide. Now, these two are blown up a little bit more, but again, we're just trying to get you really familiar with the area of Galilee. Galilee is like Indiana, Ohio, very flat, but it's surrounded by hills. So we'll go ahead and go to Akko. Let's talk about the history. This was a kind of a Phoenician city when Joshua captured the land. This is roughly as far north as the conquest took place. But this city on the coast named Akko has the most interesting history. It will later on be conquered by Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic peoples. Alexander will die, but they will name the city Akko, change this to Ptolemais, because Ptolemy is one of Alexander's generals, and he takes over this whole territory. The empire is divided up when Alexander dies, so they named it after Ptolemy II.
The silent P.
Right, and it's the same P that you find in pneumonia. You don't say pneumonia, do you? Well, 3 or 4 people do, but most of them are at home that do that. Okay. Anyway, so Ptolemy, named after, and there you see some of the ruins. So and also Stan put in for us the name of the Hellenistic period and the use of Acts 21:7. When they're coming back from the missionary journeys, they oftentimes stop at Ptolemy. Ptolemais was a natural harbor. The only other natural harbor until Herod built Caesarea Maritima was down in Joppa. And so in the book of Jonah, of course, that's where Jonah goes, to the city of
It's
Joppa.
also mentioned in Judges 1:31.
Okay, and that would be in
Before the name change.
and that would be the conquest.
Yeah.
So it goes under the name of Akko, and then later becomes Ptolemais. In the Crusader period, we'll talk about it in just a couple of minutes, it actually changed its names a couple of times, but it became known as Acre. And when modern Israel took it over again, they renamed it, as they do many places, the original name of Akko. And I can see the excitement about all this. All right, so here we are. We're going to talk about some of these things.
Well, Dr. Cloud asked me on the phone yesterday, he said, do you know why I included this picture? And I said, is it because of the goats right up here on the cliff? And he said, no, I didn't even notice them. And I said, all right, then I don't know.
Now, put it because it's on the sea. You can see the Mediterranean. We always try to stay at one hotel when we get to Israel. The first night, we try to stay on the Mediterranean coast, somewhere near Caesarea. And anyway, you can see the ruins here. It was a very fascinating, interesting city, and it was, of course, a seaport. And so we'll just take you through these slides just to give you an impression of what's still left there. Again, almost all of these places have an amphitheater of some kind. Now, those of you who could read Greek, it reminds me of Marshall Keeble was speaking in Florida one time. About 600 people were there, and he made some point about Acts 2:38. And Marshall was the famous African-American preacher, great guy. I went on one mission trip with him, And he was just making his point, and he said, all of a sudden this man raised his hand, 600 people under a tent, and said, Brother Keeble, what does the Greek say on there? He said, oh, Greek. He said, I hardly knew English, let alone Greek. And he said, anybody in the audience know Greek? And not a hand went up. He said, no reason to discuss it. Nobody here knows Greek. And he goes right on with his lecture. And he lectured my Greek class. I was a student. And he said, that won't work today. He said, there'll be some hands popping up who know Greek. But he said, get yourself prepared. Get yourself prepared. Anyway, that says on the right-hand side there's the word basileus on the coin on the back side, and that's king. And then on the other side is Ptolemy's name, named after Ptolemy II. And there's a picture of Ptolemy on the other side of the coin. Okay, all right. We go eastward, kind of southeastward slightly, and we come to a city that is not mentioned in the Bible, but is really important to the Bible. You saw it north of Nazareth. It's only 3.5 miles from Nazareth. It's called, in Hebrew, Zippori. Zippori. And get that down for the test at the end of this course. And anyway, Zippori means a kind of a bird's eye view. It's on top of a hill. And it's across from Nazareth, which is on top of a hill. All those years of teaching Bible, when I went to Israel, I did not know that Nazareth was on top of a hill. I always pictured it in the Jezreel Valley there. But it's on top of the hill, and suddenly passages came alive where it says, and they took Jesus to the brow of the hill to throw him off. I said, what kind of short hill was that? A really tall hill. So 3.5 miles south of that is the city of Nazareth. When Herod the Great died, he gave part of his kingdom to Herod Antipas. And Herod Antipas built a capital city here. And the Greek name is Sepphoris. So you'll see Sepphoris, and you'll see also Zippori. Both those names appear. When you say the Greek name, sometimes they did nothing but transliterate. They just put the Hebrew in equivalent Greek letters.
But this picture is part of the Roman road infrastructure, right?
You're right. This is the Roman road. That only reason it's bumpy is because of earthquakes. Earthquakes over the years shifted things around. But it was a very impressive road. And this is a nice shot of it, because again, bird's eye view is the name of it. Bird's eye view. And so it's really, really a nice shot. And that building on top was built in about 1187, I think it was. Anyway, it's a Crusader building, and they turned that into a museum. Now,
there was your statement earlier that it's not mentioned in the Old Testament, but pot shards, which from archaeology are the pieces that can date the timing of things that they discover, indicate that it dates back to the Iron Age, which is approximately 1000 BC, so 1100 would be.
Yeah, right. And so anyway, they decided over the years that was actually a fortress to keep that there, and they've turned it into a museum. So when you go there, if somebody takes you as a guide, if you go with Stan, because Stan's planning to go, make sure you go inside, because there's actually a museum there. And so that was the old fortress there, and then they used it for different things. But one of the things they found here was an incredible number of mosaics. Now this happens all the time in ancient Near East, or at least has happened. For example, over near Mount Nebo in Jordan, they were building a road several years ago, and they ran across this mosaic, and it was a picture of looking at Israel, a little bit of Syria, I think, Egypt, from the top of Mount Nebo, and it was a complete mosaic that was pretty good size. And so they were building a road, so immediately they had to stop, and they built a church over it. And when you go over to Mount Nebo in that area, you always go in that church. Well, they just kept finding mosaic after mosaic after mosaic on the floor, and every time they found one, they built a little building or shelter over the top of it, and then they started building these places where people could sit, and so that's where you sat if you went to this one with me, and let Ami or whoever the guy was, Murad, tell you about the Mosaic. And this is actually the first time you've seen these, Stan, right?
Right.
Yeah, we'll cover these in the courses. Stan will have with me beginning next week, not this week, but week after next. But you can see, these are all little bitty pieces of glass or stone of some kind. And so you can see, just an incredible amount of work. This was the city Sepphoris, Herod Antipas's capital, was built in 4 BC. Jesus, was born in the same time period. And then he's going to move the capital in AD 20. So Jesus would have been about 24, 25 years old. Now, there wasn't hardly any building going on in Nazareth. Nazareth was just a really small little town. Joseph was a carpenter / contractor. Back in those days, we're so used to calling him anything otherwise, but he was actually a contractor. He dealt with stone, he dealt with wood, and Jesus and Joseph would have gone over there 3.5 miles away. One of my friends, Dick Beatty, who got his doctorate and worked here in archaeology, some of you may for years heard about Irma Lee Bailey. She was one of the music teachers at Lipscomb. That was his aunt. And Dick got his doctorate, and he dug at Sepphoris and wrote a book called Jesus and the Forgotten City. But this is where Jesus and Father would have worked a lot of time. This was the city. Tradition says that Mary's family was from this city. So anyway, this is what happens when they find something, they build a building over it. Again, you can see that.
It makes road construction difficult.
I'm sorry?
You said every time they're building the road and they find one, they have to build a building over it, so now there's a building in the middle of the road.
That's so they just take the road around it.
Just around it.
What happened, one time they were building new highways in Israel, and they just started doing, in the early 90s, started doing a lot of 4 lanes. And we're going across Galilee, the valley of Jezreel, and just straight arrow. And all of a sudden, the road goes around and then back to a straight arrow, but it did a semicircle. And I said to my guide, "What's going on?" He said, "They found an archaeological site here. They had to build a road around it until they find out what they have there." But they're very careful about those things. Now, this lady, Sepphoris is called the Jewel of Galilee. I think it's in Josephus' work, but anyway, I think it's Joseph calls it the Jewel of Galilee. And this lady was named, when they found her just a few years ago, the Mona Lisa of Galilee. In this picture, you can see how attractive she was, and then when you get the closer picture, you can see all the little pieces put together. When you get further back from these things, suddenly they become one picture for you. So this, the Mona Lisa of Galilee. It's in a building there by itself now. Again, you can see the caliber of work that went on, and there's a lot of Greek, a lot of Hebrew on these pictures. I mean, all this was underground, and so it shows you. And the reason I threw this in is because this is before they built the building over. You can see, if you'll look closely, the whole floor is mosaics, and this was a very, very rich town. And later on, Sanhedrin became here. It took on a different name during the period of the Hellenistic Roman period. It became known as, I didn't tell you this, Caesarea. So there were 3 Caesareas: Caesarea Philippi, Caesarea Maritima, and they changed the name of Sepphoris. Okay, again, this is the end of the theater. You can see part of the theater. This is the stage. This just shows you what a magnificent city it was. Well, this is where Jesus would have spent a lot of time doing carpentry work. And okay, this is just another nice shot showing you the archaeological. It just gets bigger every time you go to the site, and so they're just continually digging there and finding things. Okay. Again, another view of one of the Roman roads. Now, we leave Sepphoris or Sepphoris and make your way to. We'll pass up Nazareth. We're going to do a little bit more Nazareth on one of the days we go around the Sea of Galilee. But this is Mount Tabor. Mount Tabor, I was trying to remember. Dennis, did we go to the top of Mount Tabor or not? We didn't get to go to Mount Tabor, okay. 4 years ago or so, on one of the trips we went to the top of Mount Tabor, and it was raining so hard we couldn't see 15 feet off of it. It's a great view of the valleys around. And if you take a grapefruit and slice it, not in half, but a little below the half, that's what Mount Tabor looks like. There are two sites that scholars argue about being the site of the Transfiguration. This is one of them. Mount Tabor is 1,800 feet tall and above sea level, and therefore, when the Bible says they went to a high mountain, it was the other side they argue about is Mount Tabor, which you saw and we'll see again later on when we do the Golan Heights area. You'll see some more shots.
This is Tabor.
What did I say?
You said Tabor. The other one is Hermon.
Yeah, it's a teacher speak with forked tongue. So anyway, go backwards. So this is Tabor. The other site that's argued about is 9,000 feet high. You don't always see the heights. Some of you have been. Raise your hand quickly if you've been to Jackson Hole and...
that was quick. You said quick. Raised it quick.
That whole area there, you see the largest mountain of the Tetons, right? It's 14,000 feet high. But all you see is 8,000 feet because you're already 6,000 feet high. Do you dig? I know you're not archaeologists, but do you dig? A little humor there. Okay. Anyway, Mount Tabor, the bottom of Mount Tabor is 400 or 500 feet under sea level. And anyway, so it's a very tall mountain.
And once again, like last week when we were talking about Megiddo, that you can see why this would be a military prominent place because of how well you can see and coming through the Jezreel Valley. So there at the bottom of that box, it reminds us of that. I prefer not to always have to think in those ways, but let's be realistic. During biblical times, that was a lot of the reasons that the high points were so important because you could see so far of people.
And Stan, you remember Deborah, of course, the Bible.
Yes.
Deborah's name means the bumblebee, Deborah, the bumblebee. One of the ladies in prison, who's one of the workers there, we have Cheryl and Deborah, and I nicknamed her years ago Deborah, the bumblebee, the stinging bee, I call her. But anyway, Deborah and Barak, the story in the book of Judges, is centered around Mount Tabor. This is the place that it's centered around. You want to talk about that?
Well, we included this one to show it from the other side. So what Dr. Cloud was saying is on this previous picture when we were talking yesterday, he said, people are going to find that more and more cities and buildings and modern day things are being built, and Mount Tabor, not that it's going to be any shorter, but it kind of gets obscured a little bit with all of the urban development. You can see it all approaching up the sides there in this picture. But if you go to the other side and you look at it from the country, you don't have all of the infrastructure and the buildings and the city type, scene. And so this would be what it would look more like during biblical times rather than what it looks like today.
Correct. Now, I've got a Juanita story here.
I've heard this one.
This is the road up to the top of Mount Tabor and to the Church of the Transfiguration. So didn't get to go for the first 10 or 11 years we went. We finally got to go. We had to choose Mount Carmel or Mount Tabor, and we always seemed to choose Mount Carmel. I said, let's either do them both or do Mount Tabor, so we did. That road goes up to Mount Tabor. What happens is the first part of the road, you go to where the bus can't go any further, and then you're picked up by cabs, and by all kinds of different drivers, and they race you up the top. There are no rails on the road. If you go off, you go off. And so the driver usually hustles pretty good going up, but then when he comes down, he goes much slower. Well, we're going up. Juanita had never been to Mount Tabor, so we're going and we're flying up, you know, and I had about 7 or 8 people in the band with us, and so I didn't say anything to Naeem about it because I knew he'd come down slow. Well, he didn't. When he picked us back up, he's flying down. And we come to these curves, and he's taking these curves, and I said, Naeem. He was, by the way, from the village of Deborah. There's a little town right at the foot of Mount Tabor named after the Deborah, the book of Judges, called Deborah. And so I said, Naeem, I said, every time we come to one of these curves, there are 4 or 5 flags. Are those flags there, each one of them for a person you killed, bringing them down the mountain? And he just laughed and laughed. He was, when he started leading tours up there years and years ago, they went up by camel. He led the camels went up, and then he now has a Mercedes, has a deal with 450,000 miles on it, and he's up all day, every day. So he just laughs his head off and he said, "No, Dr. Cloud, no, that's not the situation. Flags are put there for boss telling us to slow down, but boss not here today." And I said, I said, Naeem, if you don't slow down, your tip will just disappear. Slow down. All right. Okay. Oh, because the two views, and maybe when you stepped out, the 2 views about where the Transfiguration was in biblical scholarship, Mount Tabor is one they argue for, and the other is Mount Hermon. And probably they didn't build a church at Mount Hermon because it's been under occupation by Syria for so long, but they built a church at Mount Tabor because that's one of the theories, one of the views. We don't know for sure.
Well, which one did Peter, James, and John go to see the Transfiguration?
That's
One of the two.
one of the two.
Yeah, and there's a real good chance because Mount Hermon is 9,000 feet tall. He could have gone on the side. It's right next to Caesarea Philippi, and actually, we made next week. Let you talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, we saw Mount Hermon in some photographs in week 1 or 2 when we were looking at
the Dan photographs.
Yeah, when we were looking at the city with 2 gates, it was in the background. So.
And because the people at home couldn't see the week the people
right.
at home
so we'll show those
see.
pictures again.
Now we understand there's over 100 people online some of the weeks here, so we're thrilled about that.
So I will just say I apologize for all the text on here, but we just wanted to put some things in for you to be able to do in your own time if you want. Tabor is explicitly mentioned in the Old Testament 11 times. And here are the different places in the Old Testament where it's mentioned. Joshua, you see there are 3 different scriptures in Joshua in the first paragraph. Judges, 3 different places in Judges, actually 4 because there's Judges 8. 1 Chronicles 6, Deuteronomy 33. And then I left it on there. I meant to delete it. Maybe you can say something about it. But the 11th place is a reference or an allusion. It's not really there in the text. It's Tabor. It's talking about 1 Samuel chapter 10, where Samuel instructs Saul to go to the oaks in the territory of Benjamin. And what I didn't understand here is the last sentence says, "It is therefore not near Mount Tabor, but near Bethel." So
yeah, there's just like in America. I was talking to someone on the phone the other day, and one of my students, and I said, "Yeah, I live in Franklin, just a few miles from Nashville." He said, "Well, Franklin's a lot further from Nashville than that." He was thinking of Franklin, Kentucky. And then you got Franklin, Ohio, you got all these Washington. Same thing in Israel. When you hear Carmel, you got Mount Carmel, because it means something like a vineyard or some lush place. And then you have a place where Abigail lived, where David went to get paid off, in a sense, for taking care of Nabal's guarding Nabal's sheep, and Nabal gave him a hard time. They lived in Carmel, but the word Carmel had to do with some lush place. Jezreel, all of you know the Valley of Jezreel, but there is a Jezreel also in the south. And so Bethlehem, that'll be your biggest surprise. There's a little town right outside of Mount Tabor, still there today, called Bethlehem. That's why when the Bible talks about Jesus being born in Bethlehem, it says Bethlehem of Judea, because there was a northern Bethlehem and a southern Bethlehem.
Yep, so we've put another little map in here. We figured at this point it might be helpful to look at Mount Tabor. Well, here's Mount Hermon way up here, and then Tabor is supposed to be on here, right? Gonna have to turn around and look over here. Yeah, right here, yeah. As soon as you turn around and look at the other screen, you can see it, yeah. So Mount Hermon's up here, and this goes back to Curtis, your question. Either this is where the Transfiguration was, which is kind of how I lean, or this is where the Transfiguration was, and that's why Dr. Cloud's saying that the church was built on the top of Mount Tabor because it was accessible. Mount Hermon's not accessible due to modern day politics and country jurisdictions, so there's maybe not a church up there. But you can see all these different places we've been mentioning. Here's Jezreel here in the middle, and you can kind of see how it relates to things in other places that we've talked about, like Joppa, Shiloh, and Hazor that we talked about a few weeks ago. Of course, other places you know, like Damascus. So just an interesting map to kind of zoom in a little bit with different colors on what we've been saying.
Think in terms again about Israel being roughly, other than the point at the end down to the Red Sea, the size of New Jersey. You know, it's just hard for us to grasp. I spent my high school days and then college days, summer living in New Jersey, and it was 39 miles from Philadelphia to Lakehurst Naval Air Station, where my stepfather was, and it's 39 miles from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv or to Joppa, 39 miles. And it's from Haifa or Akko to Capernaum is 35 miles. So it's just so hard for us to get a feel for that area. Okay.
Just a distant shot of Mount Tabor, just how prominent it is on the landscape, and we're way up here, and then there's the church.
Go ahead.
Well, just recapping, because with 10 minutes, we've said this is the church Dr. Cloud was referring to that was at the top. Now, wanted to point out this is Dr. Cloud over here in this hang glider. No, this is just showing how high up it is, and look at the structures down there at the bottom. And then you said yesterday to me on the phone, these people here are really kind of in a precarious position because there's not anything for the edge right there to the bottom.
No rails.
And we see that when we look. Well, we'll come back to this. We see that when we look at. Don't we have a picture? Yeah, isn't that where the hang gliders are?
No. This is the later one. This is Arbel.
So guardrails are not a thing that they have over there. And so what he was saying is that you can see that the people there that are in the hang gliders and how far down it is to the valley floor and the buildings. And yet here are human beings standing right here that are in a little bit of a sketchy situation. So when we go over there, we need to be aware of that.
Look at the housetops on the southeast corner there. So that's the village down below there.
So this was a painting that's in that church, and Dr. Cloud was saying there's different rooms for different members of the night that Curtis was talking about with the Transfiguration. And so if you go with the theory that this is the place, obviously you would expect something there to remind you of it. So this is the Transfiguration Characters, and this was the room that was centered on Jesus, and so obviously he's the main character. But you have Elijah here with a dagger in his hand for killing the prophets of Baal. You have Moses over here with the tablet with the Roman numerals 1 through 10 on it for the 10 Commandments. And we're assuming that this is Peter, James, and John. Maybe John would have the little Shechaniah over his head since he's the beloved disciple. We don't really know, but that's who those people would be per Scripture.
This is the main auditorium. When you come in an auditorium, not too much smaller than this one, then the first thing you see is that. If you go to the right or the left, I don't remember which, there's a chapel one for Elijah, one for Moses.
Which is a little problematic for me, because that's exactly what Peter, James, and John suggest to Jesus, because they should have stopped talking, and they're like, hey, we could build a structure for each one of them, and no, don't do that. And then someone came and did it anyway.
Why Moses and Elijah? You see. Well, Moses was the lawgiver. There were some prophets that were like mountain peaks when you look back. I remember in the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah is just pleading with God to do something. And things don't go well. And so God doesn't listen to his prayer because of the people, not because of him. And Jeremiah is really depressed, and he's just down in the dumps. And God says, look, even if Moses and Samuel were here, I wouldn't do it. Because I listened to them and didn't always do what they said. And even if they were here. So he was trying to pick Jeremiah up. Well, Moses, of course, is definitely a mountain peak. And Elijah was, again, a very outspoken prophet, and one ascended to heaven on top of that.
Just another shot of the elevation. And this is, you taught me something here. This is
It's about time I taught him something.
A kibbutzim, right?
Kibbutzim, yeah. It's a kibbutz, the plural is kibbutzim. This is, we have stayed on two different digs. We stayed at two different kibbutzim. A kibbutz is a community where they all live together and share. When my first dig, I went to a place called Elawat, and it was interesting because we could, the dig we were doing, you overlooked a valley. But we stayed, Dr. Zertal, whose name has been coming up lately in archaeology. There's been a new discovery made on the top of Mount Arbel, and we were supposed to go there one day. It's in Palestinian territory. We had to have a military escort, but we couldn't go. They had to have a Jeep in front of us and a Jeep behind us, but we didn't get to go. But I've been through there myself. You got Mount Arbel on one side and Mount Gerizim on the other, and on top, Dr. Zertal believed that he had found the Joshua's altar, and people didn't accept it very much. Well, recently, Dr. Scott Stripling from Houston has been up there digging, and they found an altar under the altar that dates from the early date of the Exodus, and with some writing on it, and they insist that God's name, Yahweh, is on there. But we haven't really seen all the evidence yet. So that's, but in any case, we did stay in kibbutzim, in a kibbutz, and a lot of the digs, and it's really most interesting. You share everything, the people share everything. And the first one I went to, they always have some industry they're working on. So the first one, they raised watermelon. And the second one, and the second thing they did was make cellophane, sheets of cellophane. That was the two things they did. So on the dig every day, they would bring watermelon and put at 10 o'clock at a break. We started at about 4:30 in the morning. They'd put watermelon on there, and I'll never forget, I had some salt with me because they didn't have salt, and put salt in watermelon, and it killed the Israelis. They just said, you put salt on a watermelon? I said, yeah, it brings the flavor. You got to be kidding me. But anyway, that was one of the things that they raised there.
I took a peek on my phone of the slides coming up. We're going to be perfect on timing.
Okay.
So, take us through this one. This is which?
Northern end of the Sea of Galilee. Those people there, again, I have to continually chastise the students, not so much the adults. The students like to play it dangerously, get on near the edge, look over. This is Mount Arbel. We'll show you another shot of it from the sea just in a minute.
Yeah.
Down, there it is right there, Mount Arbel. When the revolt took place in AD 70 and Jerusalem was destroyed, the Romans trapped a large number of Jewish soldiers on top. Some of them leaped to their death, others were thrown to their death. They killed all of them from Mount Arbel top there. Go back to the other one just for a second. And anyway, right down below, you see the highway that makes a quick sharp turn there. On the left side of the highway,
Left side.
that's the modern-day city of Magdala. On the right side of the highway is the archaeological site that we'll show you in a couple of weeks. Now, the name of the town is Migdol in Hebrew, Migdol. It means a tower, a large structure. And Greek named it Magdala, Migdol. And Mary Magdala this is where she came from. She lived in this town. And so you saw both and this is again another shot from Mount
that's
Arbel.
another shot out to the same water there.
Right, same water, and there's the modern city of Migdol is there in the northwest corner of your picture. But you see, there are no rails up there, and I always have to keep the students away.
That's really too steep too for like goats or doing any type of herding or anything.
Right.
So it's just kind of a.
It's a real hike up there too.
Well, but I'm just saying this is a particular structure or a particular point where there's nothing useful about that particular mountain, right?
Right, they made it to a little resort
Yeah.
kind of thing. And they also catch water up there. They have pools of water. Now, if you were to go to the edge of the cliff where I keep my students away from and look to the right, you look down to the city of Tiberias. This is the place that Herod Antipas used to build his new capital city, and he named it after Tiberius Caesar. So that's why it's called Tiberias. There are three spellings of Tiberias. Tiberios is the Greek spelling of Tiberias. Tiberius is the spelling in the Bible and the spelling in Latin. And Tiberias is the name of the city. It ends in AS, but all of them are pronounced Tiberias. And yet there's three different things. This is from the hillside behind Tiberias, looking down, and you can see some of the hotels to the far right there.
But isn't this where you lectured, and this is the view? Didn't you tell me that you lectured here, and this is the view right from where you stopped?
Yeah. I actually lectured at several different places around Tiberias. The weather's always great there. We usually, on a normal trip, if we take one at December, January, we can go out and dress very lightly because it's 672 feet below sea level. Palm trees are there around this sea. We'll show you that in probably 2 weeks from now. We'll spend a lot of time on the Sea of Galilee. But the temperature is very, very mild there. And this is where the Old Testament vows were put in from 610 to 925 AD. The Hebrew Bible was worked on continually by the Masoretes, and they lived in Tiberias. And the pointing they put in is called Tiberian pointing. This is one of the hotels we stay at. This, I believe, there's two right together. One was the Crown Plaza a long time ago. The other was the River Jordan. And they were taken over by the Leonardo chain. So now this gives you an idea of how we slum it. A little humor there. We stay in very nice hotels. Well, ladies, go ahead.
You've brought us right to the end. That clock up there is fast, but it's almost straight up 11, and that was the last thought. So, good job.
Good job for you. Stan puts it together. I pick out the pictures and then we go over it together and really have a lot of fun doing it. We do spend a few hours on it, but we have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, well, hope you enjoyed it. Next week we're going to go where?
We're going to go north and the Golan Heights and Mount Hermon, Caesarea Philippi. We'll let you say a few words about
Mount Hermon, yeah.
And about the gates of